Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, the podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Meslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Today, we have a motley crew of alternative health experts from the Human Unleashed project, including previous guest Phil Escott, as well as Dr. Jeremy Ayres, excuse me if I'm not saying that correctly, Graeme Norbury and Ben Hunt. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Thanks for getting us all on. This is going to be chaos. It'll be cool.
It's going to be great.
Cool. So you said I should perhaps just introduce the boys.
Yeah, please.
It's been a while since we chatted. I think I noticed on Skype it was December 2018, and that was cool. And I think I've listened to them all since then, so I've really enjoyed them.
Thank you.
But today we've got some of my great friends on. It's been amazing actually since we chatted. I think, I won't go into my story too much. I'm a carnivore who went that way eventually from fixing his psoriatic arthritis, wrote a book about it, got a big Facebook group and consult with people, help them out, that kind of thing. But since then, I've met three amazing dudes who I've started this Human Unleashed project with, and honestly they blow me away all the time, so I thought I'd suggest that we got them all on. I'll introduce them in the order I met them, actually, because that's just the best way I can think of it. First up is Graeme Norbury. Graeme Norbury turned up to one of my talks locally, and in the middle of talking he sort of wandered in and he had some orange shades on, and I thought, hang on, this guy looks kind of interesting. And afterwards, I found out that he'd been following and studying Jack Kruse in great detail, and had heard of me through Jack Kruse. And it turns out Graeme is an ex-banker. His background is actually in banking, but it's given him the most amazing analytical mind. And he's gone into health research for the past 15 years or so. Correct me if I'm wrong, Graeme, but he's gone into all kinds of stuff, just ending up with a phenomenal knowledge of light, water, magnetism, EMFs, and so much more. And he tends to demystify Jack's knowledge beautifully. So that's Graeme. Jeremy Ayres, he turned up on my Carnivore and Beyond Facebook group, and it was hilarious, incredibly knowledgeable, really helpful to everybody. And getting to know him, I realized that he's been helping so many people to heal for the past 30 years. And his record in this is incredible. His knowledge is enormous. And he's studied all kinds of stuff. He'll probably go into it and correct me on things, but he's studied chiropractic. He's his best chiropractor I've ever come across. I tell you, what a great crunch this guy gives. He always hates it when I say that, but he's brilliant. And all sorts of other disciplines with some great mentors. Jeremy's a wealth of knowledge. And then finally, we've got Ben Hunt, who I came across when he was interested in helping me out with one of my online courses. But I got to know him a bit better online. And then Graeme and I went over to his house one day, and just the whole Human Unleashed thing fell into place. Ben has got a great background he's incredibly knowledgeable about soil, about regenerative farming, foraging, that kind of thing. He's also a great internet marketing expert and has been very successful with various ebooks and courses and projects with that, and consulted with all sorts of people. Ben's great. So he's helping us out with all of the technical stuff, but he's very knowledgeable in his own right. So I believe we're all sort of carnivore or carnivore adjacent. And that was what kind of brought us together. So there we go. That's the guys in a nutshell. We've come together to form the Human Unleashed, which I think is a wonderful partnership because we get on so well. People always love the camaraderie and the sort of humor of it. And I just think it's greater than the sum of the parts. And I'm really honored to be part of it because I've learned so much from these guys on all levels, everything from diet, lifestyle to even to financial stuff and history and politics and just what's going on in the world at the moment with this COVID thing. We have maybe not delve, I don't know what you want to do, but not delve too much into that, more into the health stuff today. But we have a lot of chats on the COVID thing on our website at the Human Unleashed. And those have been great to do. I think there's about 9 of them up now, which are free to people because I think people are asking a lot of questions and we're asking a lot too. But that's it in a nutshell, really. That's us.
That's great. Well, thanks for introducing everyone, Phil. I'm glad to have you all on today. I think maybe where we start is with kind of the thing that ties everyone together. Let's talk a little bit about carnivore and what it means to each of you. And Phil, if you want to guide the discussion a bit. And then, I know you threw out some other topics: water, magnetism, deuterium, emotional balancing. So, let's dive into all of it and, let me know how you want to proceed.
Cool. Well, as I said, my story's on another one if somebody wants to listen to that. And I thought I'd let the boys shine really on this one, but on this.
Jump in there, Phil.
Definitely. I was just going to say to Jeremy, how did it tie in with you? Because I think you've got a great story of discovering it.
Yeah, and just to clarify for the audience, I just like manipulating Phil in reference to crunching his neck. But anyway, that's a British joke. But actually my first training was in osteopathy, although I was very fortunate once I moved to my second course to have a real master called Harry Hawes, who was also trained in the chiropractic techniques. So I sort of learned them all. And then you sort of pick your favorite techniques, so to speak, and that's how you sort of form your methodologies. And then I went on into naturopathy mentored by Barbara Wren, who was and is a genius. Although I'm not sure where she's up to in her current research because she's been off the grid for a wee while, having had quite a lot of flack because she's too successful. But basically, I've spent the last 30 years researching, and I mean pretty much nonstop every day researching and helping every kind of condition that you can possibly imagine, as the guys know on my website, it shows the testimonials and things. And I've been very successful. And I was most of my techniques from a point of view of dietary and, shall we say, the physical elements, because I don't know your audience, Scott, but whether people accept it or not, it really is mind, body, and spirit. Even if you're not comfortable with those words, it really is a holistic human being that we're dealing with when someone's become unwell, or what I call in dis-ease, which is where the word comes from. But mostly I'd kind of applied the Western price sort of techniques, if your audience is aware of Western price. And I always, when I had the physical clinic, because I'm just online now, when I had the physical clinic, we would always adjust people and apply the philosophies of osteopathy and chiropractics to whatever condition came to see us, because we wanted to basically open up the flow of all the fluids, obviously the blood and the lymph and the nervous integrity of the nervous system. And so we would see very rapid improvements in conditions that had really been very stubborn, and many others seem to have not been able to help. And, because we're always researching, what I found is, strangely, that the people I remember the most, which I'm glad to say are few and far between, but the people I remember the most are the people that I couldn't help. Often I read my not often, but occasionally I read my testimonials, and tears come to my eye because I remember some of the work I've done. But as strange as it may seem, I am motivated to continually move forward and search for the truth or the greater answers on those that I was unable to help to my satisfaction or theirs. And that's what brought me across Carnivore. And I have to say, and I would imagine the story is quite similar for most, and I don't know if it's a family show, but when I first came across Carnivore, I was like, what the hell is going on here? It was so counterintuitive to me at the time that I was just sort of just looking at it, just bemused by it. However, I've trained myself, as these great guys that I'm privileged to work with and call my friends, I've trained my mind to be able to question everything, and especially that doesn't agree with how I see things. So, basically I was intrigued and I thought, well, that's interesting. Why would they say this? Because it's just going against pretty much everything I'd looked at, really, other than sort of elements of the Western price. So I started, getting into Facebook groups, and I'm letting a few secrets out here. I'm in a few Facebook groups where I don't say anything because usually I get kicked out pretty quickly. I know Phil has his experience as well, but I sort of sitting in there in carnivore groups, and the two things were absolutely apparent straight away. Number one, unbelievable healing stories and physical changes for the better. Just extraordinary. And I'm emphasizing the words because if you're already carnivore, you've probably experienced it. But if you're listening for the first time and you're at that sort of what the hell moment as I was, you have to go and look at these people's and listen to their stories, anecdotal as it may be. There's just thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And so I was like, oh my goodness, what's going on? I really have to look into this, and why is this seemingly working so well and people aren't dropping, dead of scurvy or something. And the second thing I noticed was it was about as militant as a vegan Facebook group, where if people even mentioned that they looked at a broccoli, let alone tasted the forbidden fruit or vegetable as it is, they were kicked out. And I just thought how extraordinarily horrid and wrong that was, because I'm just not that way. And so when I came across Phil's group, I honest to God don't even know how I ended up in that group. And I saw Phil. What I saw immediately was a kindred spirit and immense humor. And to be honest, we are there's so much comedy between us, and I think it's very necessary because we deal with such incredibly adult and serious subjects that if we didn't have humor, we'd probably all be raging alcoholics. But anyway, I saw the humor within the group, and most of all, I saw the tolerance. So Phil's group is 100% carnivore and beyond. And the beyond, I don't actually like the title, to be honest, but the beyond is sort of a soft tag on of it's not just all about carnivore. There's other elements involved in especially in healing, maybe not completely thriving if you're not unwell, but certainly it's sort of tagged on almost as an embarrassing hashtag at the end. But for me, and I know Phil knows this because he's had to personally go through it, and I know how many people Phil has helped, and I admire him and support him greatly. He's truly a gifted healer. Was the humility and the humor and the knowledge in that group enabled me and others to very quickly sort of get to the crux and the foundation of why carnivore is our optimal diet, that we're designed to eat it. And I wanted to, before I hand over to the guys, I want to just say one of the most extraordinary side effects that was I wasn't expecting amongst looking at people who use carnivore, which I now use that in my protocols. Where I can get people on it, because some people just won't, but where they will, which is most of them, it's just proved to accelerate the work I'm doing. But what I've found, contrary to internet popular belief, is almost without exception, people who go into carnivory become more spiritual, more humorous. Their depression seemed to go. They became lighter of spirit, and I would argue more connected. Now, there's a few arseholes out there, but that extends everywhere. As opposed to, and I'm not having a pop at vegans, but having been in vegan groups, it's brutal. The anger, the animosity, the rigidness, the dogma is extraordinarily offensive. And God help anyone, of course there's many, that dare to leave the cult. And I'm sorry, that's all it can be called. Because when you do leave it, it's not with a well-wished thought, it's with condemnation and very often brutal retaliation. So I found the carnivory tribe, shall we say, some of the most intelligent, funny, willing, giving people through all my 30 years of research.
This episode is going to be a little bit different from other Carnivore Cast episodes. I started this podcast to support a burgeoning community of carnivores, which I'm passionate about. And I'm humbled to speak with role models, hear people's health stories, and discuss deep carnivore topics that help thousands of people on their health journeys. Along this journey, others have started businesses to improve our carnivore community, and from time to time, you'll hear from select sponsors on the show. My hope is to help them grow and to share with you what I believe are products that will add tremendous value to you and products that I've found useful. With that in mind, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor for today's show, Optimal Carnivore. A lot of people ask me about how to make liver more tasteful and how to cook it or incorporate other organ meats on carnivore. Optimal Carnivore can help you do just that with their grass-fed organ complex. It was created by carnivores for carnivores, and they start by sourcing 100% grass-fed organ meats from New Zealand, gently freeze-drying the organs and encapsulating them into convenient bovine gelatin capsules. Just 6 of these capsules a day is the same as eating an ounce of raw organ meat. I personally take these every single day, as does my wife. Even though we both eat liver and other organ meats, our ancestors would have eaten the whole animal. And this unique blend has 9 different organs, including beef liver, brain, thymus, kidney, spleen, etc. And I think it's great to get a daily dose of these organs when you can. So it covers all your bases, whether you're at home or traveling. What's also cool is they plant a tree for every product sold, which helps the environment. So visit www.optimalcarnivore.com/carnivorecast and use the code carnivore10 to receive 10% off your purchase. Thanks, and back to the show. That's fantastic and great to hear that the community has been such an important part for you. Who wants to go next?
Well, hi, it's Graeme. I'll jump in next. As Phil mentioned, I originally came across him because he appeared on Jack Cruse's forum as someone who was suffering from arthritis, but someone who wrote very well. And so his forum entries were always entertaining. So I followed his story. And I'd been following Cruse for a while. How did I come to be there in the first place? I'd spent about 20 years in banking, doing a desk job. I wasn't unhealthy, but I was probably a bit heavier than I wanted to be. I was approaching middle age. I just had a daughter. And the combination of factors meant that I started to look into, and also at that age, you end up losing elderly relatives to a plethora of different diseases. And so I'd always been interested in medicine, biology, science in general. And so I began to look into health generally, which most people take, like as I did, they focus on nutrition initially. So I looked into nutrition. I began to clean up my diet by removing the obvious culprits like the cereals, the grains, things like that. So I've been pretty much wheat free for a year or two. And then I discovered Jack Cruse, who was at that point, he was kind of bombing the paleo community with new information regarding light and other aspects that they were not taking into account. And he was very much a proponent of the view that food is very much secondary. And light is the primordial driver of all life on Earth and therefore all wellness. And so I began following him. And once I realized what his output was all about, I mean, the guy's a genius. He's a neurosurgeon who was incredibly fat and got ill. And he fixed himself, but he was unable to fix himself using the medical, using the available medical advice, were unable to fix him. And so he began his own search for knowledge by delving into all these papers from years and years ago. And he began to realize that the ideas that we have about weight loss particularly are incorrect. And as a sort of an offshoot of him losing weight, he figured out how to lose weight. He figured out how energy works in the body, and how the body's not a closed system. And so the concept of calories in, calories out is irrelevant. And he began to realize and explain in all his blogs that basically a body that is, the body's designed to hold on to energy, and to basically to capture the light energy, and everything in every cell, even down to sort of the nano scale, operates driven by light and light frequencies, using water as the sort of medium in the center to capture and release the electromagnetic vibrations of water. And so his blogs were very deep scientifically, but he was always very clear at the beginning of each blog to give you the bullet points for the sort of the dummies, if you like. So I read the dummy bit, I read the sciencey bit, and I read the super geeky bit. I read absolutely everything, and I loved it. And I became absolutely convinced that he was right. He may not be right in every aspect, but he's right about light being vital. And he's also right about light is completely ignored in medical training. And it's also ignored in any sort of wellness or any kind of nutrition advice. Don't consider light. And so that I thought was a huge aspect. So I became like almost obsessed with, I listened to every podcast he did. I read every comment on every blog and every comment on every forum post. So I really, really got to know the guy, although I've never met him in person. And I realized that he had unearthed something that was so fundamental and so absent from our current healthcare paradigm. And he also drew light or shone light on the fact that biology is the only one of the main sciences that has not adopted quantum principles. Physics adopted quantum physics 100 years ago, chemistry shortly afterwards, and biology continues to use the less accurate and sometimes quite misleading classical Newtonian physics. And I began to scratch my head and wonder why that was. And then you realize that upon a foundation of biology, we have built the whole of the modern medical system and the whole of the pharmaceutical industry. So you've got multi-billion-dollar, if not trillion-dollar global business built on a particular science. And so nobody in biology is able to stand up and question their beliefs and their continued adherence to Newtonian physics, because their funding is directed entirely from the pharmaceutical industry, or almost entirely. So if you're a biologist and you want to adopt quantum principles, you're not able to do it, because by doing so, you would have to backtrack on some biological principles that have been considered as fact. And you'd have to admit that they were just a dogma based on a lack of an adequate foundation. So if biology were to switch to quantum mechanisms and use quantum science, which has been proven to be more accurate in all the other sciences, which is why everybody else has switched. If biology were to switch, it would undermine many of the underlying paradigms upon which medicine and pharmaceutical products are based. Therefore, the pharmaceutical companies cannot allow biology to advance, because in order to advance, they'd have to first reverse and then re-advance in a different direction. And that would bring the whole thing, the whole medical and pharmaceutical industry would come tumbling down. So biology is a stranded science, And medicine is a stranded practice as we know it today. It needs to be, it needs an overhaul, and it's not going to get overhauled. So we need to start again. The great thing is that, none of us have any ties to medicine or pharmaceuticals. And so we're able to just use the available information, which is now referred to as biophysics or quantum biology. And we can use that as a lens through which we can look at human health and what real health and wellness actually means. So that's my side of things. I began adopting Jack Kruse's guidance in my lifestyle. It's relatively simple. It's see the sunlight when the sun comes up, see as much sunlight as you can on your eyes and skin during the day. As the sun goes down, this is a vital part. Naturally, ancestrally, we would have had darkness, and this daily cycle of sunlight and darkness is absolutely vital to the functioning of every system in the human body. There are other subtleties and other factors related to the type of light and the type of sunlight, the different frequencies and all sorts of things during the day. But that fundamental rhythm of sunlight followed by darkness, approximately 12 hours on, 12 hours off, is essential. And we've lost that so much in the modern world. So I began implementing those kind of factors. Diet-wise, I was sort of no wheat, relatively low carb, but I still ate plenty of vegetables. I ate a few potatoes. Then having met Phil, and when he invited me into his group, I also share Jeremy's view that it's a great group full of tremendous people, and everyone's generally pretty open-minded, and there's incredibly resourceful, informed people in there. So Phil asked me to come on board in the Facebook group as one of the moderators who had a bit of a science background, because Phil will be the first to admit that he's not a science guy. So I happily did that, and then I thought, well, if I'm going to be in the group, I should at least give carnivory a try. So I switched to, I just cut out all vegetables. So I just went straight to, it was relatively easy because I wasn't eating too many carbs. So I switched to carnivore about 3 years ago almost. And I found it, the switch over for me was easy. I found it quite beneficial, but then again, I had nothing to reverse. I wasn't unwell. I wasn't terribly overweight. I lost a little bit of weight, felt generally better, had better energy, better sleep, better skin. So there were a whole series of modest benefits. My daughter, who was about 12, 13 at the time, she saw what I was doing and she said, Dad, can I switch to your diet as well? And if I switch, does that mean I don't have to eat broccoli? Because, like most kids, she didn't like the greens. And I said, well, yeah, sure, you can do it. No problem. You don't have to eat broccoli, but you can't eat, pizzas and cereal. And she said, no, I get that. I can do it. And so she's the strictest carnivore I know. She's unreal. And she also incorporates the Jack Kruse stuff in her life. So she's up at dawn, out in the sunshine, if there is sunshine. She comes in, makes herself a huge breakfast, bacon and eggs, that sort of thing. She has 2 meals a day. As soon as the sun goes down, she's got the orange glasses on. She's on her phone like all teenagers. But she's sensible. She downloads films off online, downloads them first, then watches them later with no Wi-Fi, with her orange glasses on. I mean, she's an absolute, I don't know she's just a model teenager in terms of implementing all the things that we know to be the best guidelines currently in health. So that's where I am at the moment. The interesting thing I wanted to add in terms of when I met Phil, and then later he introduced me to Jeremy, and I thought Jeremy was one of his old friends from school. I thought he'd known Jeremy for 30 years. And then we met Ben, and I had the same feeling. I thought Phil had known Ben for years. And the four of us have only been together for a couple of years, but it feels like we've known each other forever. There's such a great, just a natural feeling amongst us. It's very, very hard to describe, but it is great, and I'm very proud to be part of it.
So how about, do we want to start diving into some of the and beyond topics now, Phil?
Absolutely. I'd like to bring Ben on now and see what his take on it was, because that was funny driving up that day. I think it was the first day all of us had met him. So how did it go for you, Ben? And what's your lead up to this whole carnivore thing and craziness? And
yeah, thanks, Phil. My path into this is, my general path in life is like a toddler, with a crayon. It's just scribble all over the place. There's no direction whatsoever. I was a problem child, I think. Used to run my babysitters and nannies, whatever, wild. And I think my parents shipped me off to school when I was 2. So I started full-time school when I was 2. And this, I got into a lot of trouble at school, and I realized that anytime the sun was out, I just wanted to stare out of the window and, make pretty patterns out of nature. And I just wanted to be outside, really. I was a very, very smart child, and ended up going, through, my parents put me through private education to keep me occupied. And I started 4 different degree courses at 3 different universities, before finally coming out with a degree in nothing at all called Combined Studies. And I think looking back over my life, the thing that's been driving me forward has always been, I think, a desire to discover what it means to be authentically human. How are we meant to live, and how are we meant to be happy and relatively stress-free? I always found, homework and all of the pressures of school to be a bit oppressive. And I remember there's one time, I don't know why, but this sticks in my memory really, really bad. I must have been 9 or 10. And I was just round at a friend's house, and it was midweek, and it was warm and sunny. And I remember just lying on top of a brick wall, with my head on the wall, looking up at the sky. And I said to my friend Craig, "This is the life." Because I was doing nothing at all. I probably had homework that I should have been doing at home, but it just felt good. And there was something about that I've been trying to find for my entire adult life, and probably childhood as well. I got into religion when I was about 17, joined a Christian church, ended up joining a cult that was kind of Gaian and used techno and rave music in our services, and that all fell to bits, leaving me broken as well. I think psychologically very depressed for a couple of years. And I've always been drawn to the Aboriginal kind of, any kind of native society. I've followed. It's weird. Look, when you look back, you can see all these clues throughout your childhood. And I was into self-sufficiency when I was in my teens, and survivalism and bushcraft, all that kind of stuff. And that stayed with me. But really, what all that's about is, how can we be really happy and content as human beings? And it wasn't until, in fact, Graeme said we've known each other like 2 years. I don't think it's even 1 year. I don't think it is, since you guys all came around here for the first time. But something fell into place. And how I found Phil and then Jeremy and Graeme as well, was that I was a real greenie a few years ago, real environmentalist, and I was trying to figure out how we could save the planet and what I could do to save the planet. And I discovered regenerative agriculture, which is the idea that there are methods, and in particular the grazing of large ruminants, that can actually build soil and in doing so draw down carbon out of the air and put it back on the ground. And that led me through various things, and I eventually realized, because I'd been vegetarian for a couple of years when I was younger. I was vegan for 48 hours once in Australia, until I realized I couldn't have a smoothie, and thought, bugger that, I'm not going to be a vegan. But yeah, the path through realizing actually that this kind of symbiosis, or the complexity of prey animals, grazing animals, herd animals, and that we're all kind of part of that, and it's so that really kind of turned me back onto meat, realizing that having large herds of cows and other things was not a bad thing, and it probably never was a bad thing. So I joined a group on Facebook called the Ethical Omnivore Movement a couple of years ago, and wrote a little bit for them. It was just fascinating, and really started to fall in love with meat again, and it just felt absolutely right. And then somehow I found my way onto Phil's group, and have never been able to leave since. So about a year ago, these three guys came around here in a van, and we all just sat around, and I thought, yeah, it was absolutely as the guys have said. It like Graeme said, it felt like we were a tribe already. It felt like we'd known each other a while, and I think that just more, and the more I learn, the more I discover, the more I learn from these three guys, and from all of their influences and everything else, and the larger group that we're part of, the more I realize that ancestral living is the key. And it was like my soul had known all along, that it was the tribal lifestyle is the path to happiness and the path to satisfaction for human beings, because it is the way that we've lived for millions of years before this ridiculous charade that we've got going on that we call modern life. And so I've been steadily incorporating more and more of that into it. So, eating meat for me is part of ancestral living. It's not really the focus of my life. And I'm not 100% carnivore by any means. I cannot give up that slice of toast under my bacon and eggs, partly because it just, I can carve butter on it in great big slices, and that's just wonderful. So yeah, that's my story really. It's just rediscovering and accepting and falling back in love with the tribal impulse in life, and then figuring out how we can reincorporate that or rediscover it in the modern world, without all just going off hairy and living in the woods.
Cool. Can I jump in here, Scott? Yeah, I this is the thing that I like. I mean, Ben's eating toast. I just wanted to jump in and say, you're a heretic and you're thrown out of the cult. It's so funny, isn't it? Because imagine being on a vegan podcast and somebody says, yeah, well, I had this tin of tuna, and they'd be like, that'd be the end of it, wouldn't it? No, you were never vegan and all that. But I think, yeah, you asked before about the beyond stuff, and I think I went into it in my other interview, but the things that we're looking at are all the things that Graeme said of fixing everybody's environment as well. Like when I do a consult, I love it when somebody comes to me and they say, well, I've been carnivore for 6 months, but I've still got some issues. And then it gets interesting. Then you can go through all the light stuff and what they're doing with their sun exposure, grounding, all that kind of thing. And then you can even get into all the emotional balancing and stuff. But because I think I've talked about that before in my other interview, I'd love to bring Jeremy in here and see if he can sort of encapsulate what he does in his own practice, which is also sort of the real basis of what we do in Thu, when we make videos and do talks and whatever. So Jeremy, what do you see as that kind of whole wheel of health, if you like, and how it all ties in?
Yeah, I'll try. You've heard me say a few times that we've gotten so clever we don't know how stupid we are. And I say that because if we're in a state of time where if something can't be measured, it doesn't exist. And I'm sure technologies will probably come around that we can start measuring. I mean, that's why I love Jack Kruse's work, because he's sort of almost talking about these areas now. But it's very folly if you do look. 30 years I've been helping people, thousands and thousands of people I've helped. I speak with great experience, but it's a great folly if you think the body is just a biological machine that needs to be fixed. The word mind, body, and spirit has been used as a marketing term and sold lots of rubbish along with some good stuff in between. But you really are mind, body, and spirit. And when I take a case history, which is something that I'm probably most well known for doing, what I'm looking for is where did the dis-ease begin? And that's really important why I stress that word, because that's where it came from, not at ease. And if I've tried to do anything in the 30 years, it's trying to blend the Eastern philosophies with the West, because in some areas they're saying the same thing, just differently. Now, in Eastern philosophies, Chinese medicine, if you will, they will say that any manifestation into the physical, where, shall we say, MDs can discover it, there's already been at least 2 years with fear in the picture. And in Chinese medicine, each organ has an emotion. So that's actually the kidneys and the water element. And the next one, which is most interesting and most common for me, is the liver, which in Chinese medicine is anger, which there's plenty of that as well. So when I'm taking a case history, starting sometimes even before they were born, so the pregnancy and what have you, and even if there's got brothers and sisters, how the pregnancies went before then, I'm looking for when the first challenges or traumas were experienced with that human being. And those can be emotional or physical. For example, I've had, just to give you a little example of that, it's one of these testimonials are on my website. Actually, I had a 12-year-old brought to me from Australia via Skype consultation some years ago. In fact, father just recontacted me 4 years on, telling me she's still thriving. But when he came to me, she was in a terrible, terrible state of health and needed a liver transplant and was on all kinds of manner of toxic drugs. And they start with words like she's been sick ever since she was being born. Well, when you take the case history, she was, I can't remember what, but she was vaccinated within the first 24 hours of being born. And in the way I look at things, her body was very upset about that challenge to her. And so she threw up a fever, which they interpreted as infection. And so they intravenous antibiotics. And that's really where all her troubles began. And so from that, she became a very sickly child because her digestive system, immune system was already very much compromised. And so in came the drugs. And so we had a vicious circle just go on and on and on and on until by the time she was 12, she had the liver that they compared to a 50-year-old alcoholic. And it took 4 months to turn that case round. But the case history starting from the beginning is very important. If you take a different kind of case, which is more normal in adults, very often you find there was a lot of trauma as well early on. Or as I see more and more, people understand trauma, a divorce, sexual abuse, a divorce as a child, those sort of things. But they affect you and they go into your body. And if anyone's listening now and thinking, what a load of tosh, you're very mistaken. Because if you walk into a room and there's been an argument, and you can feel it. And if you've been insulted or upset or someone has betrayed you, very often you'll feel it in your gut. You'll feel a knot in your stomach. And even years on, when you talk about that time that woman was unfaithful, or your boss sacked you, or whatever it was, very often you'll feel it right in that gut again, because the body does have memory. And as I was trying to explain to the wonderful Dr. Zsofia Clemens of Paleo Medicina in Hungary, two wonderful doctors there doing wonderful work, I was trying to suggest to them that is it possible that your emotional states, particularly if you're in stress, which is fear, could put you into the fight or flight state, basically constantly, which we know physiologically changes your ability to digest food and affects the blood and nervous innervation to different areas of the body. Is it possible that that's one of the reasons why certain nutritional protocols don't get the results that we would, quote unquote, scientifically expect? Now, in my experience, when I take on very unwell people, which happens all the time, within about, I always ask for 3 months, 1 year, depending on how serious they are. So within 3 months, particularly since we've introduced, ketogenic and carnivore, if they'll accept that, as most will with some convincing, after about the 3 months of their gut healing, in most cases, and the stresses coming off of that human being, and they're starting to feel much better, what tends to come up is now the emotional stuff and the belief systems. And I think unless medicine really starts to understand fundamentally that we're not dealing with patients, we're dealing with people. And those people are very complex. I mean, it's quite simple in some ways, but they're very complex, and it is absolutely integrated at cellular level with trauma and memories and belief systems. And so if we're going to see the healing that I've seen on a worldwide scale, we're going to have to start to reconsider that mind, body, and spirit is absolutely necessary, and we're going to have to start putting people before profit.
Can I just jump in there, given what Jeremy's just said, specifically about the Asian or the Eastern medicine? I grew up as a sort of logical scientist, if you like. I was educated with a science education. I went into banking, which is all about zeros and ones. It's either black or white, up or down. It's very, very simple and straightforward. And I was never really into what could be referred to as the woo side of things. I would dismiss things like homeopathy, acupuncture, because it wasn't, given the science that I had been trained in, I could not prove it using my scientific background. Therefore, I rejected it. And that was an immature approach, but it was one that I had, and I suspect many people do have. And as I got a bit older, I became somewhat more open to these ideas. And then when I discovered the work of Jack Kruse, I realized that there were so many other processes taking place within the body that simply could not be detected, because even though we're very technologically advanced, it's only recently, for example, that we've developed a camera that's sensitive enough to photograph the light that human beings emit. Every cell in the body emits light. And it has been theorized for quite some time, but it's never really been proven until quite recently. And so once you realize that our technical ability is still lacking in many, many ways, and not able to sense so many of the body's functions and features. And so once you realize that, and then you look into how light and how magnetism and how vibrations and resonances can affect and actually are necessary for bodily functions and communication intracellular and between organ systems. Once I realized that, I began to I had this eureka moment that, I can use this new scientific paradigm to explain many of the things that I used to dismiss as being woo-woo nonsense. So I can quite happily explain homeopathy. I can quite happily explain acupuncture. And then with the input of Jeremy and his knowledge of the Eastern traditions in terms of organ systems and their timings within the day, within the seasons, and their links to emotion, I can then begin to put together a visual picture of how emotions are created, how they might be contained. Imagine a vibration, you have to damp it down and you have to store it somewhere to prevent it from, you can't eliminate the vibration, but you can perhaps muffle it sufficiently so that it doesn't affect your life. But to muffle it, you need to expend energy and you need to hide it somewhere. You need to store it, you need to contain it. And all of this is causing sort of, it's an internal stress, it's an energy drain on the body, and it's something which will eventually be released. And this is where Jeremy and Phil both come in, because I'm not only do I used to dismiss the woo-woo stuff, but I'm pretty much an emotional cripple. And so I've never really explored belief systems, meditation, different concepts of the state of beings, all that sort of stuff was absent. That was just an area of knowledge that I just overlooked. And what's great about Jeremy and Phil is that I can use those two guys as a sort of sounding board. I can kind of structure a perspective in my own mind, and I can bounce it off those two guys. And also Ben, because Ben's had experience of sort of religious cults and stuff like that. And so the idea of how your brain can be controlled, how your emotions can be affected. And so I just find it incredibly useful with these guys to be able to conceptualize and bounce these ideas around in a totally open manner. And we make fun of each other, we take the piss out of each other, but we advance the knowledge of the group by doing this, which I think is one of the most important features of what we do.
Yeah, but it's all coming out now. We're all just lab rats. We're actually all just Graham's lab rats. No, that's cool, Graeme. I love that. Scott, you want to chime back in and direct us?
No, it's all really interesting and fascinating how much you all have in common and how these philosophies kind of tie together. And I love that we're elevating the conversation beyond just diet. I'd love to talk a little bit more about Human Unleashed project. Can you describe what that is? And anyone can take this, but I'll default to Phil, and maybe talk about some of the other goals of that and some of the other things that you guys like to dive into and share with your audience and other people in the group.
Cool. Well, actually, I think what I'm going to do is I think I'll turn this one over to Ben, because Ben has been working recently. I thought I was quite a good writer until I met Ben. And he's been putting together this book called The Red Pill that just takes every single aspect of human experience, really, and how we've been fooled and how the media and all kinds of other influences, schooling, everything, has brought us to this state of sort of Dunning-Kruger effect, really, where we think we're experts on everything, but actually we're not. But the way that Ben's putting it together in this book, I think I'll turn it over to him to say exactly what all the sort of areas and subjects are that we deal with in the Human Unleashed. Ben, do you want to have a crack at that?
Yeah, I'll have a stab. It was absolutely fascinating, because just going back to that day last year when you guys turned out it was lovely and sunny, and we all sat on straw bales under the parachute in my garden, and you just started telling me, well, you just blew my mind, really. It's way more than diet. But at that point I knew nothing about all the cruise light stuff, and it all had hints of the fundamental links between emotions and the body and the organs and everything like that. But what I very quickly realized is that bringing you three together, when you just combined these energies, it made this real powerhouse, real force of nature, and it just rang true. There was something about the ethos that each of, Graeme and Jeremy and Phil brought to their studies. But although they'd come from completely different directions and completely different angles, we were all kind of meeting in the middle, and it was just mind blowing. So we started talking about, what should we do with this? How can we take this knowledge to the world? And it's not like it's even a finalized piece of work. It's not. It's always work in progress, So we threw around a bunch of ideas, but it pretty quickly transpired that we just had to get the word out, right? So the Human Unleashed is, how do you describe it? Because it's basically, so it's an educational program for people who are ready to, I think just dive in fully, and it's clearly a natural continuation from the carnivore lifestyle, which is one of the fundamental elements. But what I've realized, over the past 12 months is like Graeme was saying, that it really does seem all to come back to light. But it's like a radically different view of what it means to be human. And it also, the carrot that it dangles in front of you is this radically different view of how powerful and how much potential we've got inside each of us, and that's still there slumbering in our DNA. So for a lot of people, if you've been very much damaged by diet, then the carnivore remedy can help you back on track, simply because it's highly nutrient packed. You don't need to eat so much, and it's got the lowest level of stress. It places the least stress on the body. But then, like Jeremy's saying, if you, and it really is all kind of at this stress load, because you can have stress through emotional trauma. You can have stress through all kinds of different angles. And I think that, it's a case of addressing each of those that needs addressing with each individual. So it's actually quite a difficult thing to explain, which was why we decided that what we needed to do was in order to prepare people for the Human Unleashed, was to come out with this book called The Red Pill Revolution. Because very few people are actually out there thinking, this is the weird thing, because we've all grown up, and our parents grew up, and every generation is living with a new slew of technology. But the kids who are born today are being born into the world of the internet and mobile internet and all of this, and that they just don't know any different. And the human lifespan is short enough that we very quickly forget what life was like for our great grandparents. We never knew what life was like just 3 generations ago. So the Red Pill Revolution takes the reader through a journey of realizing that we are living in a kind of an artificial, illusory world, which is fundamentally it's controlled by big money now. So we go through lots of areas. We go through how we are divided against each other, how we're distracted, right? And just basically how we're kept playing this artificial game and I think each of us had, it takes a certain amount of time, or maybe there's an event that really just breaks the camel's back, for each of us, when we go, actually, do you know what? This isn't working for me. And I don't know what it is. And that's when people start to put their head down the rabbit hole. So that's what the Red Pill Revolution is going to try and do. And we're hoping it's going to be available for people to get hold of in the next few weeks. We don't know how many weeks, but it shouldn't be too long. We're working very hard on it. So yeah, Phil, is that a reasonable summary?
Can I add to that, Ben?
That's fantastic. Jeremy, just before you chime in, because I know Jeremy wants to go off. I can feel him champing at the bit on this one, and I'm going to let him run with it. But I've just got a short one here. What Ben says is spot on about what we're doing, but just a little view from exactly what it's about from a personal point of view. If you're out there and you've got some kind of an issue, and it's a multifaceted issue, like it was when I was healing. I sorted diet out, still wasn't right. Sorted the light out, still wasn't right. Improvements in all areas. But then into the emotional side, and things started to come together. And then, like wiggling the tin off a biscuit tin lid or something. Not that anybody ever eats biscuits anymore, obviously. But, you have to put up one side and then the other side a bit and then the other side a bit. And you can balance all of these modalities until it sorts itself out, and you can see all the different areas of disease in your own physiology, in your own lifestyle. And what I love about it, we went to the Lake District once in England, in Cumbria, near where Graeme lives, and we hired out this sort of log cabin to stay in for a few days. We thought, we'll make the foundation videos for the Human Unleashed. We thought we'll have 5 or 10 minutes on each subject. So we started off. And what did we get? Just every time we started off on one for 5 minutes, we realized that we were all seeing the same subject from these different angles, like triangulating something on a map. And it was beautiful because we would just go on for like an hour and go, we're never going to get through all of these. And we didn't. And so we have to do them all over Skype now, Zoom or whatever. And they're on the website, just I think 70 odd hours of it now. But it's the combination of the three of us looking at the same things. Like we'll pick something like diet, or we'll pick something like some emotional or fear or trauma or whatever subject we're picking. And then we'll find like an hour or an hour and a half later, we've got so many different sides on it. That's what it means to me, is all these different sides and how it comes together in your own healing and come in your own body, which it worked for me. But now I'm getting to expand with these other guys exactly how it worked. So that's the personal side. Now, sorry, Jeremy, I jumped in and going to let Jeremy leap off on this one. So off you go.
Yeah, no trouble. No, that's excellent. The Human Unleashed is exactly why it's called that, because most people are living in Groundhog Day in one version or another. If you know that great iconic movie with Bill Murphy, I think it is Bill Murray or whatever. But when I broadcast quite a lot over the last 10 years, and I'm quite well known for saying that I don't think my job is to create healthier slaves. And so when I'm working with people and the physical stuff is healing or healed, and I've got a few of those in that position now that were very, very, very unwell. And what usually happens is they start to become much clearer on what they don't want anymore or can't do anymore. And so to abandon them at that point would be rather foolish and not doing my job well. So what happens is they start to become truer versions of themselves. And as I said, most of them aren't clear yet on who they are or what they want to do, but they're certainly getting crystal clear of what they can't be anymore or won't be anymore. And so as we work through that, they start to rediscover their passion. And I think life is all about passion. And once they've discovered their passion, it's extraordinary how doors open. Some close, but always new ones open. And in my experience, when I sort of let them go, so to speak, is they're on a new path, and life has once more become very exciting, or certainly becoming more exciting, no matter what issues they've got left to resolve in their personal, financial, or professional lives. And without exception, what I see is people doing good and becoming them true selves, because I believe that everyone has gift or gifts. I do believe that life is sacred. I do believe there's meaning to it, and that we're not little lab rats in an industrial system where we're just here to produce, pay taxes. And I don't know anybody on their deathbed who wish they worked more. I certainly know of people, and I know Ben has spoken with a woman who worked in hospices and things and listened to the dying. And they most certainly wanted more life, or to have traveled more, or to have repaired a relationship with someone, or things like that. So the Human Unleashed goes into great detail, and it's ever ongoing. I think we have something like 80 hours recorded, and we've probably got another good 80 hours left in us to complete that. But the people that have signed up as members, the feedback is, well, it's more than we hoped for. It's extraordinarily positive. One would even go as far to say is that they love what we do and how it's helping them individually and as a group, because you get to, when you join, you get to come into our group. The camaraderie in there is absolutely wonderful. But basically, we have been born into a system that is not natural. It is many things, but it is not natural. And really, we've got to go back to the future. So we're not going to get rid of technology, but we have an opportunity, I feel, very much so in this time, 18th of April 2020, when we speak, where we have a real opportunity to advance technology that serves man as opposed to enslaves it, and bring back traditional ancestral ways in a, I don't know, quite modern way, perhaps to phrase it. And that's what Human Unleashed encapsulates. And we've been really successful in doing that. And I encourage any of your listeners to come along and join.
I tell you what's great. Another quick thing, Scott, that's great about it for me that I forgot to say before is that I've always had a real open mind, and I've always been happy to completely change my mind. Like the first book I wrote was in 96, and one of the chapters was all on vegetarianism and how great it was, you know, and how we have the guts of an ape and all that nonsense. And I had to realize that I was a complete idiot and turn it all round again. But what I love about these guys, nobody's attached to anything. All like you can see that Jeremy sort of, he'd been employing the Western price thing, but then he was still looking for more success in that area of treating his clients. And I think that, what's so important about everybody in here is that it's a totally open mind. Nobody ever goes, well, you're wrong about that. We never had an argument like that. Like, what the hell do you mean? What do you know? And getting all egotistical, because all we want to do is basically find out the areas that we're still wrong in, or still not completely up on the best thing to do. You know, we look at it, there isn't really a right and wrong. There's just, this is the best we found out so far. Like carnivory. I mean, I'm always looking for areas that where carnivory might be falling down. And I think our great friend Elliot Overton, who we've met anyway, and who we chat to quite a bit, been on our podcast, if you like, for our members. And he's great because he appreciates carnivory, but he also appreciates that people come in with various imbalances that might need to be corrected. And we often refer to him. He's brilliant. You should get him on the Carnivore cast, actually. He's absolutely fascinating. Has he been on? I'm not sure if he's been on yet. Elliot
No,
Overton.
he hasn't, but sounds like a great guest.
Oh, he's very cool. Get him on. You know, his stuff about vitamin C and thiamine and the B vitamins, and exactly how people are depleted in these, and maybe the carnivore diet, which is perfectly fine on its own, but if you come in with too many imbalances, you know. But anyway, my point is that just we love people who just are willing to be wrong. If somebody's stuck in a great big ego, then yeah, sure, we have a load of our heroes are stuck in big egos and sure that they're right. And you can take what you need from there. And some of them are our heroes, you know, and we can really appreciate what they say, but just take what we need. And from every single discipline, none of us are tied to anything and always looking for how we can improve. That's what I love about these guys. And I don't see that under one roof anywhere. And I can't believe I've sort of ended up under this roof, which is incredible, really. But to be able to, you know, some of the videos, one of us might just be completely silent because it's not our subject. I have to admit, on the latest talks about this COVID thing, Jeremy and Graeme go off into so many incredible rabbit holes. I'm just sitting there with my mouth open half the time, you know. But then if we get into the carnivory or the emotional stuff, then I'll blabber away. And that's what's so cool. We've always sort of filling in the holes in each other's knowledge and experience, but also just always willing to be wrong. And that's really important to me.
If I can jump in here, I think the Human Unleashed, as we've probably realized, because we've now had 3 people try to explain it, and none of us have really been able to encapsulate it in any sort of condensed form. Hopefully, in terms of marketing, we need to at some point reach a more concise description of what it is that we do. But my 2 penneth would be, all of us have got massive experience in all sorts of different areas, and there's some areas of overlap. And as Phil said, there's sometimes when we sit relatively silent when we're discussing a particular topic. So one of us might be very, very silent. So we've all got gaps in our knowledge which we recognise. And even when we think we know something in a particular area, none of us are too sort of belligerent and arrogant to believe that we know everything. But key for me is that I think each one of us feels very strongly that we have enough information individually to help a large number of people. But neither one of us, possibly with the exception of Jeremy, who's managed to do this for 30 years, none of us thinks that we have enough to help everybody all the time. And so to get closer to that stage, the 4 of us together, I think very strongly, we're not limited to 4 people. We have 4 people at the moment, but we're more than open to other people joining us. We're not strictly limiting it to it's our knowledge and that's the knowledge we're pushing. Absolutely not. We're totally open to coming across new people. We get them on as guests, expert guests, and we don't rule out by any means the possibility of other people joining the project as it develops. That's what's the most exciting thing about it. But I think what we offer, at least initially, is in an age where I think it's becoming clear that what we call healthcare in the developed world is letting down the majority of people. I mean, healthcare is great at trauma care. They're great at scraping you up after you've been run over by a bus and putting you back together. The diagnostics and stuff is tremendous. But the modern healthcare system throughout the developed world is very, very, very poor at handling chronic disease. And chronic disease is now the biggest killer across the entire world. And healthcare really doesn't understand chronic disease. It doesn't have the solution, and it is going to be bankrupted due to its inability to understand chronic disease. And so whether people realize it now or not, I think it's fairly clear that over the next few years, it will become obvious that healthcare is not able to deal with the disease of society. And what Ben mentioned earlier is that, we all have it in us. We are all capable of being perfectly healthy, happy human beings if only we were unleashed from the system and the control mechanisms. And I think what all of us have done over the last 15 or 20 years, we've been down a million rabbit holes. We have spent hours and hours on the internet. We have spent hours and hours talking to different people and discovering hidden history, information that you're not taught, all sorts of stuff. I mean, sometimes we've wasted our time. We've gone down rabbit holes that were pointless. We've done all that. And I often think if you found yourself unwell, unhappy, or just dissatisfied, and you began to search for the answers, it would take you so long to find the right information, to piece it all together. It would be a virtually impossible task for the average person, even though they're connected to all the information in theory. It's so drowned with nonsense across the entire spectrum of the internet that finding a clear distillation of the knowledge is virtually impossible. So I think what we offer is a pretty sound, unbiased, uncompromised, unsponsored distillation of the best available knowledge in each individual area, and with the proviso that we don't claim that it's definitive, and we are constantly updating and willing to accept that we may not have been quite accurate on certain things. So I think that's what's incredibly valuable. It's for people who are willing to think for themselves willing to reconsider and reevaluate what health really means and what life really means, I think what we're trying to do is to build a resource that they can dive into that's relatively unpolluted and relatively clear, and they will be able to see a clearer path, and they will be able to move onwards and upwards and literally unleash themselves from the chains that have been previously binding them.
That's brilliant. I don't know what Graeme means about unsponsored, though. I mean, I get millions from the meat industry for being a shill for spreading my carnivore diet lies. The vegans always tell me so. No, he's right. Spot on, Graeme.
That's great. And what I'd love to do is shift a little bit in the last 10 minutes or so here to talk about some practical takeaways for listeners. One would obviously be joining the 100% Carnivore and Beyond group to learn there and be able to interact with you guys. But what are some things who maybe, for people who are starting a carnivore lifestyle or, practicing some of these health habits, but are still really under optimized, and haven't heard a lot about, light and some of these other practices, you all employ. What's some of the low hanging fruit? Maybe, the top 3 things that someone listening to this can take away and start implementing in their daily life after this podcast.
Okay, shall I whiz in real quick on that one? I would say, if they're already on a carnivore diet and not having a complete success, I would, my other 3 things would be definitely get the circadian cycle sorted out, get your light sorted out. This will lead to probably the second one, which is sleep. Absolutely get sleep sorted out. And then start to look into the emotional stuff and find your path in life. Because if you're not well and you're not happy and you're not satisfied, it's very unlikely that you've actually found your path in life. So find out what your passions are and kindle them. And, if you can't make it your profession yet, at least allow yourself to go down that path of finding out that we're not here to be slaves to bosses and companies, that we are designed to follow our own passions. So don't let anybody tell you that you can't. So, carnivore lifestyle, get the circadian thing sorted out and get your life path sorted out. Find some passion. That would be mine anyway.
If I jump in here, let's take the position that someone's carnivore, as Phil said, they've been carnivore for a while, or they're considering starting carnivore. Very, very simple and totally risk-free things to do, which would provide additional upside. Try to imagine yourself as a carnivore living wherever you're living at the moment, but imagine that you're living 1,000 years ago. And think specifically of the light exposure that your eyes and skin would have got back then. So your body is trying to, if you provide your body with more information about your environment, your body is better able to configure each individual mitochondria in your body as a sensor. And the mitochondria sense the environment and they configure the cellular structure and the cellular processes to suit the exact environment that you find yourself in. So get outside in the morning. Do whatever you can to see the sunrise, or as close to sunrise as you possibly can. See the sunrise every day with your naked eyes, no contact lenses, no sunglasses, no glasses. Get outside. 5 or 10 minutes is all it takes in the morning. Look in the direction of the sun. Doesn't matter if it's behind a cloud. Just get yourself outside. Even if you're under some shelter, you're under some kind of porch, have your coffee and your morning cigarette, whatever you want to do, have it out there, staring at the bright bit in the sky every morning. Do that. During the rest of the day, try to expose as much skin and eyes naked as possible, as often as you can. In the real world, we work, we drive to work, we take the metro to work, whatever we do, we are in an office. Try to get out as much as possible. Try to take short breaks. Go and stand outside in the sunlight. take your shoes off if you can. If you can't, lean against a tree or lean against something that's earthed. Again, as much sun exposure as possible during the day. And then also try to always eat during the day, because historically we would have eaten when we could see what we were doing. We didn't eat at night. We ate during the day. Your body's designed to be stressed and to get damaged and injured during the day. So do all those activities, and eating is a stressful activity. Do those things during the day. And then when the sun goes down, this is absolutely vital. Melatonin is the key chemical which restores mitochondrial function during the time when you sleep. It repairs everything. It's the best antioxidant, anti-cancer, you name it. Melatonin is the key hormone. Melatonin is produced during the day from sunlight. Sunlight triggers the production of melatonin. Melatonin is then stored and it's released after 3 or 4 hours of darkness. Strictly speaking, it's the absence of blue-green light. So when the sun goes down, make sure that you're not exposing your eyes or your skin to blue or green light. So you use red lights in the house, use candles, use gas lamps, whatever you can figure out, but don't use LEDs or fluorescents. And if you have screen time, which most people do in the evening, I realize it's normal, try to avoid screen time as much as possible after dark. But if you must do it, get yourself some quality orange glasses, some blue blockers that genuinely do block the blue and the green frequencies. Wear long trousers, long sleeves, cover up as much of your skin as possible if you are exposed to the light. And this will allow your melatonin to be released, because when the sun goes down, your melatonin, the blue disappears. That triggers your melatonin to be released, and it triggers the beginning of a whole cycle of renewal that takes place during sleep. So you want to make sure you're not suppressing melatonin release. So you want no absence of blue light completely after dark. And you also then want to create a sleeping environment which is free from any electromagnetic disturbance. So you want no electrics in your bedroom, no mobile phone on the bedside table, no Netflix just before you go to sleep, no Wi-Fi. Switch off your Wi-Fi before you go to bed. Ideally, don't use Wi-Fi, use cables, but let's assume you're using Wi-Fi. Turn it off before you go to bed. That will also suppress melatonin release. But more importantly, your body's designed, if you go back 1,000 years, you'd have been sleeping in a cave or a hut. You'd have been sleeping on the ground. You would have been in total darkness, in relative cold, and in total electromagnetic silence. The sun goes down, you have zero energy input into the earth. The only thing you sense is the magnetic field of the earth, which is stronger at night time than during the day. So you want to create an environment in your sleeping area that is as free from cellular disturbance as possible. And that's basically it. That if you do those things in addition to going carnivore or being carnivore, you will notice benefit within weeks. Over and out.
Absolutely. Can I follow on from what Graeme was saying? Because I think the idea of, Graeme's coming from the deep cellular health angle. And I think that the same principle that Graeme just described, that kind of thought experiment of winding the clock back 1,000 years. In fact, ideally I would go further, because we've been farming for about 20,000 years. So I'd want to go back a little bit further than that to tribal and hunter-gatherer times. And this is something that you can do in your head when you're falling asleep if you want to. Just imagine what it would feel like to wake up with the sun, to go out of your hut or your cave or your shelter that you've built, and to how would your day go? What would you eat? When would you eat? Imagine being in contact with Mother Earth through your skin or through leather-soled shoes for the entire day, and think, just try to get that sense of being completely connected to the rhythms and the energy patterns of all of nature that's all around you, right? So, you may have clothes, but you'd certainly be in contact with the earth pretty much 24/7, or, only separated by natural animal skins or other products like that. And where would what would your activity be like? We'd be squatting a lot on the ground. We would have occasional periods of intense exercise. So we might go hunting. We might want to take down a large animal, like a bison or something like that, which would require coordination. And that's where sport comes from. So, and what would your entertainment be like? It would pretty much be, you'd be laughing and making jokes with your friends. And when you came back, someone would be lighting the fire. You'd sit around the fire. You'd tell stories. You'd have a laugh, and you'd probably sing songs and play music. And that would really prepare you for a full, deep, completely nourishing sleep. And the next morning when you wake up, you'll be full of energy again. And the other interesting thing, I think a really key thing for me, and the more I think through this, the more important it is that the things that we do, whether it's our work or whether it's our play or our fun or our relaxation, is kind of within arm's reach, So if you want to make music, you would make a flute, or you would make a drum, or whatever it would be. You would remember stories because they were important. You would learn a skill because it was important, right? Whereas these days, in the modern day, you're not, we pack our kids off to school where they're taught what to think, not how to think. But in ancestral times, you would just be, you'd want to discover and learn what was going to help you survive and what was going to help you to have an easier life. And bottom line, you'd be working, you'd be doing chores for about 20 hours of the week, which is what today's Stone Age tribes do, the Maasai and Papua New Guinea and Amazon rainforest and stuff, generally tends to be about 20 hours a week, not the 40 plus hours. So, for me, let that realization of just how far we have strayed from what's really going to make us happy and really going to leave us healthy and completely connected and stress free. And that, I think, is the starting point that can allow people to turn around and say, actually, I don't choose to order a pizza tonight. I'm going to cancel my gym membership because I don't want to go and run on a treadmill for 90 minutes of every day. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to make something, So the whole principle of primal ancestral living just comes on so many fronts. But to me, it is the answer to all of our problems.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I like how each of you have layered on different aspects of stress and light and circadian rhythm, all super important things that have helped my health tremendously, even after finding a carnivore diet and lifestyle. I really had to focus on these things and get them right to improve my energy levels, my mood, my general well-being, digestion, etc. It all ties together. Well, this has been fantastic conversation. We'll probably have to do a part 2 at some point, but really appreciate you all coming on. And I'll just ask Phil, where's the best place to find everyone? I will link to the 100% Carnivore and Beyond Facebook group and Human Unleashed project in the show notes, thehumanunleashed.com. But please let me know if there's anywhere else I should share.
Well, I think that's it for the places to find all of us. Humanunleashed.com pretty much leads to everything. And if anybody's interested in those COVID talks we've been doing recently, I think you might be surprised at some of the rabbit holes we go down on those, particularly as they develop. And we might well add to those as the situation goes on. It's a fascinating time, eh? But I think that's all. And just thank you so much, Scott. I think we managed to behave quite well and get our points across. And so I hope that was all right for you.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you all for taking the time today, and talk to you soon.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered, or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at CarnivoreCast, or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.